In November 2024, over 77 million Americans made a choice that would change the course of history. Donald Trump, against all odds, reclaimed the White House and promised to make America great again. However, as time goes on, underlying issues are becoming more apparent. Frustrations are growing, prompting many Americans to ask, will they regret voting for Trump again, just like Britain regrets voting to leave the EU? Or is this the dawn of something greater? Let's dig into this.
My first day back in the White House, I'll terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration, stop the invasion on our southern border.
Much of President Donald Trump's 2024 election campaign was built on nostalgia and a promise. He told Americans that his first presidency had been stolen from them and that his return to power would correct the wrongs of the past 4 years under former President Joe Biden. During his campaign, he vowed to finish the job he had started in his first term, fix the economy, close the border, end the chaos of Washington, and put America first. But as reality set in, just about 2 months after his inauguration into office, it became clear that governing a divided country in 2025 was not as simple as rallying a packed stadium of devoted supporters. During his campaign, Trump's biggest selling point was growing the US economy. He often boasted that under his first term as president, America saw record-high gains in its stock market, significant tax cuts, and strong job creation across various sectors. He promised that his second term would be even better. However, as 2025 unfolds, the economic picture of the US seems to be a mixture of many things at best. The stock market saw a sharp rise immediately after his victory in November and December 2024, much of which was driven by investor confidence and deregulation policies that would be implemented. However, this optimism was quickly overshadowed by inflation creeping back due to continued tariffs, supply chain disruptions, and the massive cut in corporate tax that created more deficit. During the campaign, Trump blamed the Biden administration and its spending style for the high national debt. However, within months of his return, the projected budget deficit for 2025 was set at about $1.9 trillion. His decision to push for another round of tax cuts, mainly benefiting corporations and high earners, increased the growing concerns about the US's long-term fiscal stability. While some businesses celebrated this deregulation and lower corporate taxes, many middle-class Americans saw little to no relief as the cost of living soared. Another significant campaign promise was on immigration and border control. Trump vowed to seal the border, bring back strict deportation policies, and build more secure sections of the border wall. Since assuming office, reports confirmed that new sections of the border wall, which were approved during the Biden administration, have begun construction. The result? There has been a significant reduction in illegal crossings, but also a severe labor shortage in industries and services that rely heavily on migrant workers. More livestock farmers, construction companies, and restaurant owners reported difficulty finding workers, increasing consumer costs. Could this be a repeat of what Britain saw after Brexit? On governance, Trump declared that he would drain the swamp once and for all when he gets into office for a second term. However, his second term in office has witnessed a record level of reshuffling of government officials and agencies. He has replaced some of the most senior figures in the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Federal Election Commission with more of his loyalists, causing questions about whether such institutions would be independent of the government. He signed executive orders more rapidly than in his first term, bypassing legislative approval to put certain policies into place without consideration. His supporters interpreted this as strong leadership, while critics warned that it was moving America toward an unaccountable presidency. So is Trump's return to the White House delivering the success he promised? Or could it simply be a déjà vu? When Britain voted to leave the European Union in 2016, it was viewed as a bold declaration of independence. The idea was simple: free Britain from EU control and influence, take back total sovereignty, and negotiate better deals on its terms. However, the following reality was far from what many Britons would have predicted. The UK economy slowed, trade barriers became stricter, and many businesses began struggling. 5 years after the separation was finalised, many Britons regretted voting for Brexit. As Trump pushes his America First agenda harder than ever, Some wonder, is the US on the same path? Trump has never been a fan of global alliances. In his first term, he pulled the US out of major international agreements, such as the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal. In his second term, he wasted no time reinforcing his nationalist stance. Shortly after coming into office, he had already doubled down on imposing more tariffs against China. He reimposed strict trade policies on European imports, sparking concerns about a possible trade war. Trump also targeted NATO once again, with the demand that all European allies drastically increase their defense spending or risk losing support from the US military. Reports came out that Trump would withdraw additional troops from Germany and South Korea, which is drawing raised eyebrows from foreign policy experts. The message was that America no longer desired to be a world leader unless on Trump's terms. In Britain, the realization that Brexit was not the economic miracle it was promised to be took years to sink in fully. Will America come to a similar realization with Trump's second term? Or will his gamble pay off in ways that the world has yet to see? With the first of the few months of Trump's second term in the books, the stage is set for what could either be a remarkable comeback or a repeat of Brexit's slow disappointment. The US economy has always been a central talking point in any presidential administration, but it has become even more of a battleground under Trump's second term. Trump supporters believe that his second term would bring much financial prosperity, thanks to the stock market boom they witnessed during his first presidency. However, history has shown that initial optimism does not always translate into long-term stability. Just like Brexit initially gave the UK a sense of economic independence before leading to years of struggle in various sectors, the question now is, will America experience a financial rebirth, or are we simply witnessing the calm before a bigger economic storm? In the first few months of Trump's return, the stock market experienced a sharp rally, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average reaching new record highs. Investors were hopeful, as usual, betting on deregulation, tax incentives, and an aggressive push toward economic nationalism. True to its promises, Trump's administration wasted no time rolling back several of Biden's financial regulations, loosening the restrictions on Wall Street, and doubling down on tax incentives for large corporations. His supporters saw this as a necessary correction after what they perceived as excessive government interference in private businesses. Yet if history has taught us anything, it's that unchecked market expansion often creates bubbles, and these bubbles eventually pop. Take the UK's post-Brexit economic outlook, for example. When the Brexit referendum was passed by Parliament members in 2016, the British pound began to fall in value immediately. Still, politicians insisted that the UK was regaining control as promised to the public. Eventually, market uncertainty, trade barriers, and inflation resulted in varying degrees of economic hardship. Businesses struggled with new regulations, companies relocated to better cities, and Britain scrambled to fix the damage it had created. Similarly, while the US economy under Trump appears to be growing on the surface, several warning signs are emerging beneath the figures. Inflation remains a major and growing concern. Trump's tax cuts have put more money into circulation within the United States, but combined with his aggressive tariffs on foreign goods from other countries, prices of everyday essentials continue to increase. Gas prices have fluctuated wildly due to renewed tensions with oil exporting countries, and housing costs continue to rise beyond affordability for most middle-class Americans. The Federal Reserve has been caught in a delicate balancing act, trying to bring down inflation without raising interest rates so high as to destabilize the housing market. Economists are warning that if the Fed has to increase the rates too much, it will cause a recession, similar to the one suffered by the United Kingdom after its own Brexit crisis. Another critical issue is the job market. Trump has bragged about bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, but the reality is beginning to look far more complex. Most sectors still struggle with supply chain disruptions, as some companies have transferred their manufacturing costs to consumers. In the housing sector, mortgage rates remain high. With prolonged stagnant wages, fewer Americans can afford to buy homes. The rental market has exploded due to this crisis, making housing costs one of the most urgent financial concerns for working-class families across the United States. This is a scenario very similar to the UK's post-Brexit property crisis, where housing affordability hit an all-time low, leading to increased homelessness among many low-class Britons. Wealthy investors, Wall Street executives, and corporate leaders continued to thrive under Trump's monetary policies, just as Britain's financial sector initially saw gains after Brexit. However, for the average American, the long-term effects are still unclear. If history is any indication, economic optimism can disappear overnight. If there's one undeniable truth about Donald Trump, he has always been deeply controversial. His leadership style has divided many Americans in ways few other presidents have done, creating an us versus them mentality that has shaped political discourse across the country in recent times. Under his second term, this division only deepened as partisan battles and cultural wars continued to erupt across America. Trump's presidency has strengthened ideological battles already taking shape before he took office. Supporters see him as a fighter and advocate for upholding traditional American values, someone who refuses to bow to political correctness and is willing to take on what they call the radical left. Since Trump's return to power, various views and opinions have erupted over his style of immigration policies, restrictions on reproductive rights, and heightened police militarization. Some of these views have turned offensive, with clashes between Trump supporters and other party loyalists, fueling an already volatile situation. Social media has only created more of these divisions, with the algorithm feeding its users content that reinforces their views, making it harder to find common ground. Trump's rhetoric has also helped to increase the existing gap. His attacks on liberal cities, media, and political opponents have fostered an environment where compromise seems impossible. In the UK, the Brexit crisis also created more friction within different parts of the kingdom, with Scotland again claiming independence and Northern Ireland engaging in border conflicts with Ireland. Similarly, California and New York have intensified resistance to Trump's agenda in the US, with state officials openly flouting federal directives. This has raised concerns that America is headed toward a level of internal division that could be difficult to heal. The United States media has further fueled this divide. Several conservative news outlets have praised Trump's efforts to restore America to its core values, while left-leaning networks warn of a creeping authoritarianism under the Trump administration. The disbelief in mainstream media has led to the creation of alternative news sources, many of which spread misinformation and deepen ideological divides among Americans. This mirrors what happened in Britain, where pro-Brexit and anti-Brexit tabloids published several news articles that painted entirely different pictures of reality. This left the public uncertain about whom to trust. Even within the Republican Party, Trump's return to the White House has been met with mixed reactions. While his support base remains firmly behind him, some other conservatives have persisted in expressing their discomfort with his style of leadership and the long-term implications of his policies. There have been internal party battles, with some members attempting to distance themselves from the more extreme group of loyalists. This is, again, similar to the troubles in Britain's Conservative Party immediately after Brexit, when political leaders had trouble remaining united, as both factions fought to lead the country. At the heart of this political and cultural divide is a fundamental question. Can America survive another 4 years of this level of increasing division, or is the country reaching a breaking point? The signs of regret about Brexit are growing louder in the UK, as many Britons now wish they'd voted differently. Could the same fate await the US? Every administration has promises, but the policies define a leader's legacy. Donald Trump's return to power was marked by a renewed push to enact some of his most controversial plans, this time with fewer restraints and a Republican majority Congress willing to back him. Visible changes in immigration, deregulation, tax policies, and several Supreme Court decisions have already shaped his second term. One of Trump's boldest moves has been a renewed crackdown on illegal immigrants. Within his first month in office, his administration has revived and expanded some of the strictest border control policies in modern US history. Deportations of these illegal immigrants are on the increase. Restrictions on asylum seekers have tightened, and the construction of new parts of the US-Mexico border wall have resumed. Trump argues that these measures will help to protect American jobs and national security. However, just like Brexit's hardline stance on immigration resulted in critical labour shortages across various industries in the UK, America may soon face similar economic setbacks in the coming months or years. In the UK, post-Brexit immigration policies led to an extreme shortage of healthcare, agriculture and construction workers. The US too is beginning to see a similar problem, as some farmlands, especially down south, are beginning to find it difficult to get labourers, and hospitality businesses are also reporting shortages in staff. Deregulation has been another vital point of Trump's second-term agenda, as his administration has slashed several environmental protections, rolled back financial aid, and relaxed oversight on corporate mergers. On paper, these measures are meant to fuel the economic growth of the US and allow more businesses to operate with fewer restrictions. However, history suggests that excessive deregulation could often lead to economic instability. The 2008 financial crisis, for example, was largely attributed to a lack of strict regulation and oversight in banking and lending practices. Similarly, Britain's government's push to loosen trade and financial regulations resulted in much more market uncertainty and capital flight. If Trump continues on this path, the US economy could face similar risks, particularly in the housing and financial sectors, where unregulated markets can easily go out of control. The Trump administration has introduced yet another round of corporate tax cuts, similar to the ones passed during his first term. His supporters claim these cuts will help grow the economy, but critics argue they primarily benefit the wealthy and further widen the income gap. The UK's experience offers an example of how this could play out. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss attempted a massive tax cut strategy in 2022, which backfired so dramatically that it triggered economic panic and led to her resignation shortly after. The US may not face an identical scenario, but if deficit spending continues to increase and the national debt isn't reduced, confidence in the economy could weaken, leading to long-term economic consequences.
The nomination of a Supreme Court justice is the most important decision an American president can make.
One of Trump's most lasting impacts will be in the judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court. During his first term, Trump successfully appointed 3 conservative justices, creating a right-leaning majority. In his second term, any additional appointments will further set the court's direction for decades. This has already resulted in major legal shifts, including stricter laws on abortion, a rollback of federal regulations on climate policies, and potential challenges to voting rights legislation. While Trump supporters see it as a victory for further right-wing domination, others warn it will lead to years of court battles and internal conflict, just as Brexit's legal fights over its trade deals and border policies. The Supreme Court's decision will shape America's policy in the years after Trump is out of office. If history is any guide, the ripple effect could be much more far-reaching than now anticipated. But despite these policy shifts, Trump's popularity remains strong among his party members and supporters. However, the deeper question is whether these changes will stand the test of time or will be remembered as reckless decisions that led to long-term economic and social turmoil in the United States. This is similar to Britain, which was once confident in its Brexit decision but now grapples with an economic downturn, labour shortages, and a fractured political landscape. Regret is a slow realisation because it doesn't hit all at once. More often it takes years before people question the choices they once championed. In the UK, Brexit was hailed as a defining moment of national independence from any external influence, reclaiming total control over its borders, trade and sovereignty. The movement had undeniable zeal, just like that of Trump's Make America Great Again campaign. Yet years later, polls report that most Britons regret deciding in the first place today. The recent economic strife, trade barriers and labour deficiency have put quite a different colour to the description initially provided. Will Americans find themselves in a similar position years from now, looking back at Trump's second term with remorse? Public opinion is one of the biggest indicators of whether regret will set in. At the beginning of 2025, Trump's approval ratings were strong among his supporters, but sharply divided among the broader population. Most Americans who voted for him had anticipated economic relief, tougher immigration laws, and a return to the more traditional conservative path. But months have passed, and some initial warning signs of frustration are starting to creep in. Already, companies are complaining about labor shortages since they began cracking down on illegal immigrants. Farmers are also feeling the effects of increased tariffs on their agricultural exports. Most working-class Americans who expected immediate economic prosperity find that rising inflation and housing costs remain a persistent challenge. In media, the landscape is also shifting. While conservative newsrooms continue to champion Trump's policies, more independent analysis and financial experts are questioning the long-term sustainability of his economic strategies. The phrase Trump regret has already started appearing in political discussions, much like the term Brexit emerged in Britain. However, many argue that reaching such conclusions is much too early. Ahead of the 2028 election, the political climate remains largely uncertain. In his second term, Trump is governing with fewer checks, pushing through legislation with long-term impacts on America. The Republican Party is also experiencing some measure of internal conflict, as some party members have expressed their frustration with Trump's leadership style and its impact on the long-term ethics of the party. If the US economic struggles worsen, its international relations continue to strain, and political polarization deepens, the regret factor could grow significantly among many Americans. Just as the vote for Brexit reshaped the UK's political landscape, Trump's second term could redefine the Republican Party and American politics for years. One may ask, is the US heading toward a moment of collective regret, or will history judge Trump's presidency as a necessary course correction? Time will tell, but as Britain learned the hard way, decisions made in the heat of political fervour don't always age well. And that is it, guys. Is the US on the path to renewed greatness, or are we watching history repeat itself in a way that could cost the nation dearly? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.